Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't mince words when discussing Jim Jordan's actions on January 6th, accusing him of running around scared as the Capitol descended into chaos. According to Crockett, it wasn't just a moment of disorder, it was a real-time test of courage and leadership. And one she argues Jordan failed. She suggested that while others were focused on protecting democracy and upholding the rule of law, Jordan was more concerned with his own safety than fulfilling his duty. Crockett's remarks reignite the political divide surrounding January 6th and raise deeper questions about who is truly prepared to defend the Constitution when it matters most.
Officials.
One final question.
One quick final question.
Do you really believe that President Trump thinks he lost that election?
Yes. Our investigation following the facts and the law determined that...
No way. Thank you. That's enough.
I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for unanimous consent.
Actually, I have two. One is to article entitled, "With AG Bondi next to him, Trump says deranged Jack Smith must be investigated." And the other is a tweet from Marco Rubio. "There is nothing patriotic about what is occurring on Capitol Hill. This is third world style anti-American anarchy."
Without objection. Gentlelady from Texas is recognized.
Can I get an extra 33 seconds?
You get your full 5 minutes.
Well, okay, fine. It's curious because you've sat here all day, and thank you so much for showing up, because this was something that you wanted to do. The Republicans wanted to make sure that you were hid in a room with no cameras, because I was there. They didn't really want you out public because they were afraid of what you would say, which is that you could have proven your case because you are a career prosecutor who knows how to prosecute criminals. So just to be clear, today, it seems like the Republicans have not really fought very much about whether or not Trump was guilty or not. In fact, their fight seems to be over whether or not you were authorized to prove their guilt. Do you recall a number of Republican members asking about whether or not your appointment was okay, even though we know that you've testified about the more than 100-year precedent that allowed for your appointment?
I was asked questions about that today, and our position, as we filed in our appeal, is that there was strong support for my appointment, including Supreme Court precedent directly on point.
Thank you so much. Additionally, everybody's been all gingerly here today, but I don't know why we're acting surprised that a man who had close to 90 allegations out of 4 different jurisdictions and ultimately ended up with 34 convictions after a jury was able to hear all the evidence would possibly be committing a criminal act on January 6th. In fact, considering the fact that we are now under the impression that he is violating people's due process rights, he is ignoring court orders, he's starting wars without congressional authority in contradiction to the Constitution. He's enriching himself to the tune of over $1.4 billion. He's shaking down electeds to draw maps that will help him stay in power because the Republicans don't understand that they swore an oath to the Constitution and that we are supposed to do checks and balances. He's also shaking down TV stations to get money. So why are we trying to pretend as if it is out of the realm for this particular man to commit the crime that he committed on January 6th, and frankly, the only reason he ran for president was to make sure that he would not be prosecuted, because I fully believe that you would have put him under the jail based on our long-form conversation that we had. But according to your special counsel report on page 137, it states the department's view that the Constitution prohibits the continued indictment and prosecution of a president is categorical and does not turn on the gravity of the crimes charged, the strength of the government's proof, or the merits of the prosecution. And that, quote, but for Mr. Trump's election and imminent return to the presidency, the office assessed that the admissible evidence was sufficient to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. In other words, Donald Trump ran for president, like I said, so he wouldn't have to spend the rest of his life in prison. The chairman and other members of this committee have spent all day attacking you and trying to rewrite the history of January 6th. But Mr. Jim Jordan, the chairman, failed to mention how he was running around the Capitol terrified by the possibility that all those insurrectionists would harm him. In fact, on page 97 of the deposition transcript, you mentioned how Mark Meadows, the president's chief of staff, quote unquote, never saw Jim Jordan so scared. The chairman also failed to mention that he was in direct contact with the White House in the days leading up to and on January 6th, which is why his toll records were subpoenaed by your office. Let me be clear, because they're trying to act like this is Democrats on Republicans, and I guess you are a covert Democrat that knew that he was going to try to steal an election before he tried to steal that election, and so therefore you were somehow put into place. I mean, the conspiracy theories make your head spin, but nevertheless, were you going to subpoena the toll records of every single Republican simply because they were a Republican?
No, we subpoenaed the toll records in the course of this investigation because they were relevant to our investigation.
Relevant. Oh, okay. All right. So that means something about facts. So let's talk about facts. Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden, yes or no?
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, 60 federal and state courts have found that there was no evidence of election fraud. Trump's own attorney general and vice president knew that he lost the election, but he still tried to steal the election by pressuring state officials, designing fake elector plans, nearly having Mike Pence hanged, and ultimately demanding that his supporters, quote, fight like hell, correct?
Correct.
We all saw it happen we all saw what happened once they reached the U.S. Capitol. As your report outlines, President Trump knew that he would incite violence at the Capitol that day. In fact, some of Trump's senior advisors were pushing for violence. For example, page 81 of the report details how co-conspirators number 2, John Eastman, tried to convince Mike Pence to break the law, stating that, quote, violence was necessary. So it isn't just Trump who is responsible for the death of multiple law enforcement officers and the injuries of thousands of people. A lot of Republican members of Congress are also responsible. 147 Republicans voted to overturn the 2020 election results, including multiple members currently serving on this committee, and I will yield.
Gentlelady yields. Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, we've heard a lot of information that's gone across this day as we've spent it here. We've heard disregard for the First Amendment at times. We've heard talk about solely seeking charges against Donald Trump, obviously targeting. We've talked about the amount of time and reasonable time frame.
Democrats argued that Republicans had spent the entire hearing avoiding the real issue, Donald Trump's criminal responsibility, and instead fixated on whether special counsel Jack Smith was authorized to prosecute him. Smith reminded the committee that his appointment followed long-standing precedent backed by Supreme Court case law. Democrats then pointed out the absurdity of pretending that Trump committing crimes on January 6th was unthinkable. Trump had faced nearly 90 allegations across multiple jurisdictions and ultimately racked up 34 felony convictions. He continues to ignore court orders, violate due process, enrich himself through public office, and pressure elected officials to redraw maps to maintain power. He has even profited over $1.4 billion while shaking down media outlets for cash and starting wars without congressional authorization, directly contradicting the Constitution. According to Smith's own report, Trump only ran for president to avoid spending the rest of his life in prison. The report also concluded that if not for his imminent return to the presidency, prosecutors had more than enough admissible evidence to secure a conviction at trial. Republicans repeatedly attacked Smith while trying to rewrite the history of January 6th, but they avoided the fact that Chairman Jim Jordan was terrified that day, a claim backed by Mark Meadows, who said he had never seen Jordan so scared. Jordan was in direct contact with the White House around January 6th, and his phone records were subpoenaed for relevance, not partisanship. The facts remain. Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden. 60 federal and state courts rejected claims of fraud. Trump's own attorney general and vice president admitted he lost. Yet he still tried to overturn the election by pressuring officials, pushing fake electors, encouraging violence, and telling his supporters to fight like hell. Co-conspirators, including John Eastman, openly argued that violence was necessary. 147. Republicans then voted to overturn the 2020 election results, including members currently sitting on the committee. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't mince words when discussing Jim Jordan's actions on January 6th, accusing him of running around scared as the Capitol descended into chaos. According to Crockett, it wasn't just a moment of disorder. It was a real-time test of courage and leadership, and one she argues Jordan failed. She suggested that while others were focused on protecting democracy and upholding the rule of law, Jordan was more concerned with his own safety than fulfilling his duty. Crockett's remarks reignite the political divide surrounding January 6th and raise deeper questions about who is truly prepared to defend the Constitution when it matters most.